Hey, everybody, welcome back to Movie Chatter. I know it's been a long time, but we are back and we are going to cover a movie a little bit outside the scope of what we would normally cover. We're going to kind of take it easy. No more action movies and people killing each other with pencils and things like that. Just for this week, we're going to cover Yesterday. But before we get to that, I'm Eric and I'm here tonight with Lou and Robin. Robin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing pretty good so far. Lou, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. It's my Friday, so I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Right. I'm also looking forward to the weekend. This has been a rough week at work for me, but and then, starting a little late tonight because Windows it's being Windows. So what can I say? So let's just dive right in. For those who don't know, this is a movie that came out in 2019 and directed by Danny Boyle. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Danny Boyle, he's a good director, right? And Robin likes him, I think. I thought she had mentioned movies before that he'd done that she liked. So why don't we cover Yesterday? And I kind of...
And I had wanted to see it. I had never seen it.
I thought you had seen it.
It was on my.
That's right.
It was on my list to check out, and
okay.
I was like, I never had time, and forgot about it until we mentioned it. I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I'll watch that."
Okay. Well, before we move on to my thoughts or Robin's thoughts, then Lou, what did you think about this movie?
So, I enjoyed it in the fact that it was an enjoyable movie. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. It wasn't really, it was never going to be like a top 10 for me or anything. Sure. And I could see how people would feel either way about the movie. So I'm going to kind of sit back and be Switzerland here and let you guys kind of argue and sway me one way or the other.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Why it's good, why it's bad.
All right.
And I'll chime in with my thoughts occasionally too. But.
Robin.
It was a pithy little movie. You all know how much I love comedies, rom-coms. This wasn't really a rom-com. There wasn't enough.
And I thought that might save it.
And a little bit too much
I thought that might save it for you because even the romance was distanced and the comedy was not like a laugh out loud comedy. It was more just like situational. I thought maybe it was like not quite enough of either of those two things that this would be the success.
The whole point of the movie was the romantic engagement here between I disagree. It wasn't about the romance. It was about the self-reflection that he came to inside himself. And that led him to romance, but at the very end, but it wasn't about the romance. It was about him and his journey inside of him. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I was going to put that in the description, but I couldn't spell "yeah" very well, and
I'll spell it out for you next time.
I'll agree with Eric there.
Okay.
I don't think this movie was about the romance. I mean, it was secondary, and you didn't get any of that until the very end.
Right.
No, you got that all the way through. Please, she was pining.
Didn't. No, you observed the fact that she was,
but it didn't make it a romantic.
It wasn't
comedy.
about her and the pining.
It is classified as a romantic.
Of course, because
comedy.
what else are you going to classify it as?
Right.
Drama.
I mean, I kind of wanted, halfway through, I'm like, why isn't he interested in her? But then I'm like, okay, it's not the movie.
I'm sorry. I want to say this right up front. You guys know where I'm going with this already. If Lily James is that into you, you have to be the biggest idiot. I mean, the Beatles have to have never existed. Like that has to be the degree to which the universe is messed up for you to just say, not even paying attention.
So I get you guys are going to say this wasn't the point of the movie either, but it's not like I hated the movie. I actually texted, I watched it while I had a long day at work with long pauses in between bursts of things that I had to be there in person for. And I remember texting Lou once, if not
Notice
several
she never
times.
texts me
This is the longest.
during the movies. It's always you.
No, because I always want you to be surprised. But I texted Lou, I said, this is the longest movie I have ever seen.
Wow.
And I watched Reds and really enjoyed it. So, you know.
And Reds was not really enjoyable, so that's impressive.
Justice League. But it for me, it was the pacing. The pacing was an issue.
Okay, that's fair.
And these long, prolonged silences that were just like, oh my God, speak. Just speak. Even if you're wrong, speak. So that was a problem for me. Otherwise, the concept, original, pretty interesting. I think the casting was perfect.
I agree.
The American music producer,
Kate McKinnon.
her name was what?
Did I get it right?
Yeah, Kate McKinnon
from Saturday Night Live.
She really like I could watch her all day long. She played her role
And
perfectly.
she played the most annoying character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But it was it was like taking a breath mint in the middle of this long drawn out thing where you kind of forget to breathe because it was that slow. But and I thought Lily James, of course, was brilliant. So I can't put my finger on it except that it was just too slow for me. And of course the music was beyond brilliant, and the ending, and when we get there, I want to talk about how well played that was.
Okay. All right. So, and I don't think spoilers really matter too much for this movie. We'll get to it a little bit later. My initial impressions, this was not the type of movie I typically would have watched. I'm not really a Beatles fan. The movie did look like it was going to be a little slow. And I guess maybe that helped me because it meant my expectations going into it were tempered. I expected kind of a slow paced movie. I expected one that was not like funny, but it was more about exploring this concept, which it did well. And I really, I fell in love with the performance by Himesh Patel. And of course, Lily James. I mean, you know, and again, it was just so tragic that like she's throwing herself at you and you're just, you don't do that to Lily James. That's just horrible. But there were some interesting themes there too. The kind of the concept of, I don't know, like the first time around, it was just kind of this, oh, you know, what would I do in that kind of scenario? And then when I rewatched it for the podcast, I started catching all of these deeper things like, okay, so we get so wrapped up in the creators sometimes of art, whether it be film or novels or music or literal like paintings and stuff. Sometimes there's merit in the art itself. And, you know, the Beatles weren't around in this movie. The whole thing is that you've got this kind of a street musician guy. He gets hit by a bus. He blacks out. When he comes to, nobody's heard of the Beatles or Oasis.
Well, it was a global phenomenon.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
Right. There's like a whole thing behind it. And so he kind of starts, you know, he's just sitting there at a little cafe with a couple of his friends and he starts playing Yesterday on a guitar and they're like, oh my gosh, it's like the best song ever. And he realizes that he could start performing Beatles songs. And then he blows up and he becomes this like huge, massive celebrity, like the most famous songwriter of all time and everything.
Bigger than Ed Sheeran.
Right. And it's kind of interesting because right now in our society, we're dealing with a lot of issues where the the behaviors of celebrities are coming into question because they're often not behaving the way they should. But then do you throw out the baby with the bathwater? And I'm not saying you don't either. I'm saying that it's a complex issue. One of my favorite TV shows of all time is Firefly. I love Firefly. I am obsessed with Firefly. And now all this stuff has come out about Joss Whedon. And it's like, well, I don't like any of this stuff that's being reported that he's done. And it's being reported by a crap load of people. And so I'm thinking there's probably something to, when there's enough smoke, there's probably a fire, right? But do I just like stop liking Firefly? Firefly itself is a really good piece of art. And so you're looking at something like this, and you know, the songs by the Beatles, they're really good regardless of who's performing them. Right? Well, I mean, if they're, we have to assume that it's a decent performer, but you know, my point is the art that the Beatles created.
Nobody wants to see me.
Yeah, we don't want to see like the three of us try to, you know, that's not going to go well. But the art itself, the content was just so good. And what would the world be like with the absence of that? And then there were some other additional things that spun off of it too. But yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting because during the Beatles' time, right, they were certainly oftentimes controversial, oftentimes did things that were not approved of by the culture, certainly the culture at large. If you want to look at John Lennon's legacy of social justice and how he enacted that on his own stage, his world stage. The good news about the film is the songs for the characters in the film were bereft of all that political and cultural drama, and they still, they still captured an audience's, you know, respect and admiration and adoration, and that to me was a perfect a gift to the testament of their music. And so I'll leave it at that. The global phenomena thing, I had a problem with that because it seemed very random. And
see, to me,
for me,
I kind of like the fact that it played off of the more modern perspective of kind of instant celebrity status that we get with social media and all of that. And I kind of felt like, you know, the interference, the changing of Hey Jude to Hey Dude and all of these kind of different things. And like, you know, the big announcement on the roof of the hotel and like all of this is stuff that would not have happened this way back when the Beatles were around.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the randomness of we lost the Beatles, we lost Coke, we lost.
Okay.
That seemed very random to me, and it took me out of if we would have just lost the Beatles, that would have been better for me.
Oh, you didn't like the fact that that was not the only thing.
Yeah, like there's just this randomness about it, and there was no threads that I could.
Well, there's also no explanation for it being the Beatles that were lost either. I guess to me, it demonstrated that it wasn't like one singular thing that didn't exist, because then it kind of feels like there has to be a reason why it was that thing. Instead, it was just kind of some alternate timeline sort of thing, and it was just, you know, various different things. Where the Oasis wasn't there, Coke didn't exist, Harry Potter never happened, you know.
And like I said, that seems very random.
Well, yeah. If it weren't random, they would have had to explain it in detail, and then it would have become a sci-fi movie instead.
Okay, I would have taken it.
Really?
Sure. Sci-fi, yeah.
Oh, I would not have wanted.
I would have taken sci-fi.
See, this is one of those situations where I think the concept of the story is more important than the explanation of the world building.
And I knew you guys were going to say that.
Well, that's ironic though, because we're very much into world building as sci-fi geeks.
Yeah, and I'm usually very annoyed by not having all the the pieces of the puzzle.
Right.
But I didn't have a problem with this at all. I was intrigued by the story, and because it's that whole kind of alternate history thing that I as a second subgenre to my time travel stuff. Sorry, Robin. It's something I really enjoy, and this was kind of cool to dive down these paths of what changed and what else wouldn't have been around.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I'm so glad they didn't explain any of it. It was just something happened. The average person, even if somebody does know what happened somewhere, the average person isn't going to. And it's about, what would happen if the Beatles never existed?
But here's the other random thing. 3 people on the planet remember the Beatles. 3. There's no
that we know of.
Right.
I think that he would have been outed given this phenomena, that given who he became. I think he would have been outed.
Why didn't those 3 out him? I mean, who knows?
Well, the two didn't out him because they realized what had happened, and they were appreciative that he brought the music back.
But you're saying if other people knew about it too, they would have outed him. So why did these 2 not do it? I mean,
and again, it's
so that bothered you too, probably, because that's the same kind of type of thing.
It's just, it felt very random. I get it why they had to be in the story. I liked the mechanism they provided, which was, again, bringing us back to a deep appreciation for the brilliance of this music. I am a huge Beatles fan. To say I'm a huge Beatles fan is an understatement. So, I tend to gravitate to all things Beatles and the relationships between the Beatles and what they brought us. But again, so I understood why the story needed those 2 characters there. But it just, again, there's just a little bit of randomness. It also,
it created a little bit of conflict, a little bit of, kind of the will they or won't they thing until there's that confrontation. Right. And then also too, it demonstrated that this whole thing wasn't just happening in his head. He's not going to wake up the end and, it was all just a dream. So it kind of,
that would have been bad. And
so having them, I think, gave validity to the storytelling a little bit as well. And back to the themes too. The 2 other themes I liked that they explored in this movie is, number 1, to what extent do you pursue your career versus your life? And then also, what is actually important? And then, so there's that aspect of it, but then there's also the exploration. And this part's been done before of, kind of fame and, having imposter syndrome and all of that kind of catching up with you. But
sure,
there were a lot of explorations of themes of identity and priority and value that I liked seeing in this film, because this film tackled it in a different way than other films that try to do it. So the pacing wasn't great. I'm glad they didn't do too much with the world building, because that would have broken the story. But I liked what they did with the story, and I liked the exploration of the themes. And I stand by the fact that even though there's no other way you really could have categorized this movie other than a romantic comedy, really, it wasn't about the comedy. It wasn't trying to be some like stupidly funny movie. And it wasn't really about the romance. It was an exploration of self. And it was an exploration of being an imposter and being genuine and having integrity, and love in the sense of, what's actually important to you, your friends, your relationships, or this thing that you've discovered that you can do that nobody else can do. That isn't even necessarily a talent of yours. It's fraudulent. Like, that whole journey is what the movie was really about. The romance was the reward at the end. It wasn't the journey it wasn't the Romeo and Juliet story. It wasn't You've Got Mail. It wasn't Sleepless in Seattle. It was not a Nora Ephron movie. All due respect to Nora Ephron. It was nothing like that. So
I have to say the masterful piece. Now, I feel like the director failed us on a couple
Okay.
of meaningful ways, but masterfully gave us a brilliant, um, just a brilliant moment towards the end of the film.
Okay.
And if you guys are
Yeah, let's
ready
go
to
ahead.
talk about that, I want to.
Sure.
Because what he does is he brings us probably the most controversial, but certainly one of the most loved Beatles back, in the form of a John Lennon who is living out a life in an alternate universe. And, the moment where Hamish Patel, I forget his character's name,
Jack.
Jack.
Jack, the moment Jack says to him, "Oh my God, you're alive. You've lived this long. Are you happy? Have you lived a good life?" That actually brought a couple of tears to my eyes because Lennon was robbed, early on of a life well lived. And that was a brilliant gift that this movie
Played
brought us.
brilliantly by an uncredited
Yes.
Robert Carlyle.
Ah.
Yeah.
Uncredited.
Uncredited.
Oh,
I sat through the entire credits and I got to the casting twice and went back over it. I'm like, I could have sworn that's Robert Carlyle, and he wasn't in there. I had to go to IMDb to look it up and confirm it.
Huh.
Brilliant job.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the director. So Danny Boyle.
Danny Boyle. Yeah.
Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah.
Sunshine.
Brilliant.
28 Days Later. Train Spotting.
Yeah.
I mean, and I wasn't a big Train Spotting fan, but I respect that it was a well-made movie. So not all of his things are like spot on for me. He directed Steve Jobs, which was actually pretty good. A Life Less Ordinary, 127 Hours. He's done some things.
Yeah, he has. And so I think he could have done, I'm sorry.
You think he could have done better?
Sorry, Mr. Boyle. I think you could have done a little better. Pick up the pace
and yet
more.
The pacing really is the only thing. Like you've had very positive things to say about most of this movie.
I love teasing you with text.
I mean, it brought you to tears.
I know. She hated it so much I cried.
That says something.
I had complicated emotions because I'm a Beatles girl.
See, and I'm not a huge Beatles fan, but I appreciate their music.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that kept running through my mind through the whole movie was, how would these songs be taken today without a history? Would they get that kind of response that he was getting as he brings these songs to media? Would they gain international notoriety and become, oh my God? I mean, they're great songs, but what kind of reaction would they have to today's world if they're brought out in 2020, 2021?
Well, and really, it depends on which part of the Beatles you're bringing out. There was also a randomness.
Yeah.
Well, there was also randomness, right? The Beatles started out very much a product of the music scene at the time, and only after they became famous did they start to branch out to become other people with other types of music. And in that, those four artists were amazing. Five, if you believe some stories, but four artists were truly amazing. And the randomness of the selections of the songs that he could remember and started bringing out was kind of crazy. And then to see the crowd respond to the full range of Beatles music, just sort of randomly plucked in there. I mean, first you've got Yesterday, and then he's doing Back in the USSR, and then he's going back to, back and forth between the Beatles' own timeline.
Yeah.
Still being very well received.
So I'm not familiar with the Beatles catalog very much at all. I mean, there are some obvious ones that I know. I thought his performance of Yesterday was really good. And I think that is a song that definitely, if it came out for the first time today, would be successful. There were songs in this movie I've never heard before. And no matter what I pick, Robin's going to roll her eyes and say, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've never heard that," because I mean, it's the Beatles.
I promise.
Whereas Lou, it was like, when the Beatles were coming around, he's like, "Oh, you darn kids, get off my lawn," So it's kind of, he never really connected with them back then. And I'm not judging you, Lou. It's okay.
Punks. They're punks.
It's okay.
They're just punk
You know those kids are. But like, and I hate to admit this, I'd never heard The Long and Winding Road before.
Wow.
And I'm like, wow, that's a really good song. Like, I went and got it on iTunes after that. Actually, the version from the movie, I don't think I've heard the Beatles version. But I'm sure it is. But I think, to your point, Lou, there are some songs that probably would not really do all that well today. Like, I Want to Hold Your Hand. It's kind of an earwig kind of song. It's catchy, but I don't think it would really do it. But there were some songs from that era that probably still would. I think some of the ballads really hold up. And then there were a couple of kind of the faster, more upbeat songs. The one that he did, Help, I think.
Help. Yep.
And some of them they changed up a bit too. It made them more rockish and so forth. But I mean, even just the length of the song. I mean, the length of song today doesn't mean as much as it did back then. I mean, if it was over 3 minutes, forget it. No one's gonna play it, type thing.
Right.
So that makes a big difference too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the way they subtly altered the song. Hey Dude was an abysmal, awful thing that they did to Hey Jude.
But it fit the story because that was part of the story.
It fit the story.
Yeah.
It was the discussion about doing it. I mean, even the characters later on were like, really? Hey Dude?
Yeah, exactly. But
you're right. It was abysmal, but that's exactly the sort of thing that would have been done today to make it fit.
And I did like the way you blamed it on
Ed Sheeran.
It's like freaking Ed Sheeran.
Well, as he should have, because
exactly.
You know what? I've never been a fan of Ed Sheeran, but I might have to listen to some of his music.
Oh, he's got some good music. Yeah.
I haven't really heard.
I'm not a huge fan, but what I've heard I like.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm thinking back to the Discord conversation this morning about electronic music. Never mind. Inside joke. Okay. Anything else about this movie? Have we pushed you in one direction or another? Are you leaning more in favorable,
I don't
unfavorable?
Think so. I mean, I'm still. I think it was a good movie. It was fine. Will I ever watch it again?
Which is fine.
Rainy Saturday afternoon when nothing else is on.
I mean, there were a lot of good moments in the film, the movie.
If I couldn't get off the couch and couldn't find my remote and it was on TV, would I leave it on? Sure. But if I could get up and grab the remote, I'd probably change.
I guess that's not what I'm asking, though, because I think, we talk a lot about this, but I watch it again. And sometimes I think there are movies that aren't great movies that I've watched over and over and over. And then there's some movies that are phenomenal movies that I know for a fact I'll never watch again. Because it's either too emotionally heavy or various different reasons.
You're right.
So... Would you recommend it to people or no?
I would recommend it. It's a fun movie.
Sure.
There's some good comedy to it. Yes, there is some romance in it. But it's that whole alternate history thing that what if could happen. Right. I like that concept, and it was fun. I mean, the casting was good. I was surprised to see. Kate McKinnon as the producer there, and it was just fun. I mean, even down to the song battle he had with Ed Sheeran when he was on tour with him. I was like, that was cool, and it's like, yeah, dude, okay, you win,
right?
It was a fun moment, and then people starting to, at the end of the movie, towards the end of the movie, people starting to realize, how are you this good all of a sudden? Right. All these, every song's so it was starting to come out and weigh on him, and I think that was what pushed him over the edge to come clean about it. So yeah, I mean, predictable and a little slow, like you guys mentioned, but I think it was a good movie.
I did like the giveaway. I did read that the ending was written differently in the first go around.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so I like the ending here. I liked the giveaway. It was in the spirit of how the Beatles lived their existence. Truly.
What was the original ending?
It says the original screenplay was simply that Jack did not find success with the Beatles songs.
Okay, so he didn't come clean, and he just, 2019 just wasn't a good time for new Beatles content.
Yeah, it says in Barth's script, a meditation on professional disappointment, Jack did not find success with the Beatles songs, so they reworked it. And yeah, and then this came out.
I did like
this particular.
I kind of liked the optimism of the fact that the crowd accepted it. Like they were, yeah, we still love you, and they kind of forgave him for it. Like I'm glad that they didn't take that moment and turn it into something where the entire world was against them. And I'm just really sick of the idea that society is just, they worship their heroes almost so that they can build them up to be bigger conquests to destroy later. And I'm glad we didn't get that sociological destruction at the end here. I'm glad they didn't go that route.
Yeah, I think this helped Jack become a whole person, and had he not done that, he would have remained damaged. So I think it was a nice ending. It brought us all full circle. It was given in the spirit of how the Beatles lived their music and adored making music and adored the audiences who loved them. And so I was happy with at least that ending. Of course, we had to have the the ROM in there, but yeah, that is what it is.
See, and at the end of the movie, the only thing I was thinking of was that, he is going to be sued so bad.
Yeah.
for releasing all that content that they spent all that money on. He's going to be in Lawyer City forever.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, Robin has said more good things about this movie than many of the recent movies we've covered on Movie Chatter. So even though she seems, she's claiming to be a little lukewarm on it, and she had some really good points about some imperfections in the film. And Lou, everything you said about how it's not like a stellar film or anything, it's never going to be in anyone's top 10. You're probably not going to rewatch it. All of that notwithstanding, it's a good movie. Even Robin thinks so.
I like movies like this, but you know what? My favorite movie to rewatch that is sort of like this is Pirate Radio.
Okay.
And that for me is also a touchstone in my own music, sort of the music of our lives type of thing. And so while this doesn't stand up to that, it gave me some moments of that. And so definitely if we were in a battle between this and Pirate Radio would sort of win out, but this isn't as bad as Across the Universe, which is another Beatles inspired movie infused with a ton of music, strictly by the Beatles. And so this is kind of in the middle of that whole piece.
I
think that's like a whole genre unto itself, sort of like Lou's time travel.
Are you saying it's a
subgenre.
subgenre?
I don't know.
I think
she kind of just said that. A yellow,
You two are
a yellow
bad influence.
Yeah, never mind. Tried to make a Beatles joke. I'm not enough of a Beatles fan to make it land. But I do want to say that when it comes to movies that are focused on particular types of music or particular bands or artists, they did a really good job with this one compared to a lot of other movies that try to take the shtick of the gimmick of, you know, this is a Bon Jovi movie or something, and, you know, they're following Bon Jovi around the country on tour, and then at the end they have some moment with Bon Jovi and he sets them on the right path or something. Like, when you look at movies that are directly inspired by specific music, this movie isn't about that. Like, that's just the mechanism that tells this story.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No,
right.
I see what you're saying.
So I thought they did that well. And you don't see that often. So anyway, it sounds like we can all recommend it. Robin, what do you say? Would you recommend this film to people?
You know what? If you like the Beatles, go ahead.
What if you don't
it.
like the Beatles? I wasn't a Beatles fan. Like, what about the rest of us?
Well, if you're open to, if you've never heard of the Beatles,
then you have other problems, I guess.
Then you would not understand the movie.
That
right?
rock that you've been living under might crack. But if you need to appreciate the Beatles, this will give you an appreciation for the artistry of the Beatles if you listen to the lyrics and don't listen to the voices that are singing the lyrics, because I mean, you know, I don't want to speak ill of him.
I thought he did really well.
Our actor, but he was no Paul McCartney or John Lennon.
Actually, there were some so I actually listened to the soundtrack, and there are some pieces I prefer the soundtrack version to. Yeah.
Really?
And it might have been the arrangement, but I mean, so hold on. The Beatles weren't good because they were good vocalists. The Beatles were good because they were good songwriters and because they were good performers. Like Freddie Mercury from Queen was a brilliant vocalist and a good songwriter. But most groups, they're either really good at one or really good at another, or really good at performing, but not other aspects of music. Like, there are some people that do great concerts, but the music quality of the concert kind of sucks. It's more about the engaging the crowd and the performing. So the Beatles were, in my personal opinion, not being a Beatles aficionado, they were good because they had solid performances of incredibly well-written music. But it's not that they were...
I would argue that Sir Paul is a brilliant vocalist.
You don't think he's a good artist?
I would argue that Sir Paul McCartney is a brilliant vocalist.
See, I would say he's a very good vocalist, but I wouldn't say like he's like, that's not, if you take the best vocalists since he entered the music industry, I mean, he's not even in the top 20. Like, if you just look at pure like vocal range and timbre and clarity, like, but he's a good songwriter.
I mean, he's not known for being
a really good vocalist. He's just like, you know, he's not in that top percent.
I mean, he's a singer-songwriter that was a member of a very famous band.
Right.
As opposed to a just outstanding vocalist.
I'm not dissing him. He's really good. I'm just saying, like, he's
gonna come knocking
not
on your
when
door.
you are like, you know, you take the genie out of the bottle and you're a musician. They said, I'll give you 3 wishes. And you say, I want to be as good a vocalist as. I don't think there are many people saying Paul McCartney over a number of other people who are like
I see your point.
Flawlessly good. So anyway, I think we should probably move on. So I think that's going to do it for this episode of Movie Chatter, discussing Yesterday. I would say see it. Sounds like the two of you would say see it as well.
Yeah, I'll second it.
It might not change your life.
Yeah, all right.
But I mean, hey, you get to watch Lily James for 2 hours, so that that doesn't hurt either.
Yeah, that was the other text I sent. Are we watching this because it's Lily James?
And I said yes. Yeah.
I'm watching it because it's Lily James. You guys should watch it because it's a good movie.
You need to watch The Dig, Eric. You need to watch it.
I really don't think I do.
Really?
It doesn't sound. I will watch it at some point. Yeah.
So speaking of what to watch, what do we decide for next week?
We're still deciding that. We may have to do that offline. I don't know. I don't want to turn this into like a 15-minute long. What about this? What about that? But we've got some.
We should do? We should start putting all the movies that we talk about doing into a hat, and just pull it out of the hat each week.
Tell you what. Here's you two, and I will do the same. But you two write down a list of at least 10 different movies that you think we should cover, and think it through, like with specific reason why you want these movies to be covered, and we will throw them into a Google document, and we'll go through and we'll prioritize them, and if we ever do get stuck, we'll throw them in a randomizer, and then we'll pick one. We'll go from there.
But last time we talked about, because I wrote a list here on my calendar. It's right here on the calendar. Yesterday, Chaos Walking, nobody. Okay.
So Chaos Walking, I finished it since like I said, we should probably do this offline, but I saw it since I mentioned it last. And so I'll throw out a quick 20-second review of it. It was good. It was not great. And I don't know that it's necessarily discussion worthy.
Okay, fair enough.
Like, it's not horrible. It doesn't suck. It also doesn't stand out. Speaking of movies I'll never watch again, Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley, good sci-fi, post-apocalypse. Like it's all the stuff I would want. You're never gonna watch it again. So, nobody. I'm still watching. None of us have seen it, so we can't officially add it to the list until one of us has seen it, because we learned that lesson the hard way multiple times. But we will. We'll come up with something, and we will get back at you very soon. So we are going to sign off for now, but we will be back in a week with another hopefully wonderful movie to bring to you. And if it's not wonderful, we will at least be able to discuss why and tell you why you should or should not check it out. So that's going to do it for now. Head over to randomchatter.com, where you can find the rest of our podcasts and many, many more shows, by the way, over there, more than what you get here on YouTube, but also subscribe on YouTube. Go to randomchatter.com/YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you like the episode, hit the like button too. And we will see you next week. Until then, take care.